This PowerPoint is about getting students to think about how they conceive of knowledge and how it's been constructed, so effectively epistemology, without necessarily using the word epistemology until we get a bit further into it. So I've called it Concepts of Knowledge and Epistemology, as that's what it's all about, and the objectives are to talk about the concepts of knowledge, explain the scientific method, and be aware of the differences between the empirical and interpretist epistemology. The session starts off with an activity where in small groups the individuals consider how they know particular things or different types of knowledge. So you can see here, this is the instructions for the groups. Each one of the groups will be given a different concept of knowledge, and then I would normally go around and support each of those groups thinking about that different type of knowledge and how they would use it. Then once they've done that and you've talked to all of the group and had their feedback, then we as a whole group activity go through the various slides. The sorts of examples that I use with this for time-based or traditional knowledge, if students are struggling, are things like particularly men not wearing skirts, those sort of cultural social norms that are long-standing ideas but are not written down or anything like that, and that usually goes down quite well. Common sense and intuition is usually a good one, talking about, you know, not extracting a boiled egg with your fingers and using stuff like experiences to extrapolate, so you don't need to plunge your hand into boiling water to know that boiling water is hot because you've probably splashed a bit of boiling water onto your hand at some point. The pragmatic theory of truth is great example is Santa Claus for parents, or particularly the newspapers, and then you can also use this to get across the unreliability of newspapers as a source of information in academic writing. Correspondence theory and truth is usually quite good, and if they're struggling with that one, somebody's usually got a bottle of water in the room and we can talk about finding out whether or not that bottle of water contains water or gin, hopefully not gin, in one of your lessons. And then finally, concepts of knowledge, the credential based, and doctors and that sort of stuff is usually not too difficult. Coherence theory of truth, we can talk about the classic example of the black swan in Australia, or anything else that that we might talk about. The world is round and those sorts of things. And then once you've done that, you've pretty much gone through the activity and you're on to the general type of traditional learning that goes through this type of example. So then the rest of the slides are fairly normal, things that you would be familiar with and happy to go through. And then finally, I ask students to make a note of these items, and then they use that as a task for the following week where they've been and got definitions of them. And then that can start off for really looking at how these two approaches fit into epistemology and the research process.